Hey guys, welcome to Maker Monday. So I decided this week that we would try to make a kite because it's summer and maybe you don't want to buy a kite. There's several ways to make one. I'm just going to show you one way. You will need string, and if you would like, ribbon, as well as I'm using a wooden dowel cut into 2 pieces, but you could use, some smaller sticks. You could use skewers. There's lots of other things you could use instead of a wooden dowel. All right, you're going to need either newspaper or a plastic trash bag, or even possibly a small plastic bag, like a grocery store bag, depending on how big you want your kite. You'll need tape and scissors, as well as something to mark your newspaper or your plastic bag with. I have a Sharpie. And then they also suggest to have a weight for the tail of your kite, just to make sure that it angles right so that it'll catch the wind. So I'm going to be using a washer. But if you don't have washers at home or you're not handy, you probably have a couple of safety pins lying around, and you could pin that onto the tail to give it some little weight and a little bit of drag too. So with that, I'm going to move the camera so that you can see how I make it. So the first thing you're going to do is, if you have a wooden dowel, you're going to need to find a way to cut it into 2 different pieces. I used a Dremel, but you could snap it, you could use a little handsaw, whatever works best for you. I just happen to have a Dremel, so I use that to cut into it. Alright, so the first thing you're going to do is your long stick and your short stick. So you're going to make a cross. You want it to cross about 1/3 of the way down of the wooden dowel. Okay? So it should look somewhat like that. And you're going to take your string and you are going to tie them together. So you want to make sure that it's kind of in the middle of the small dowel and about 1/3 of the way down on the big dowel. So if we do this, trim a piece of string to work with. So 1/3 of the way down, I just cut a small piece of string, and you're just going to want to kind of wrap it crossways. It's going to take a minute, but I've got to go around both sticks. And it's going to be easier if you make like an X around both sticks. So, as you can see, I wrapped it a few times. And it's still a little wiggly. But it will tighten up the more you cross. Okay? But I think mine's good, and I'm going to trim my yarn. Alright, the next thing we want to do is we want to lay out our newspaper. The size of my kite, I'm going to have to do, you can't go top to bottom or side to side. I'm going to have to go corner to corner, okay? Just so that the whole thing fits. Alright, you want to make sure that you leave about an inch so that you can close up your kite, which is where your marker comes in handy. Okay, so if your kite's going to be point to point, if you draw from your point to point, and it doesn't have to be super straight, and if you do want it to be super straight, you can get a ruler or a yardstick. But then you want to make sure that you go about an inch outside so that you can actually get it to wrap around, so that you can tape it down, tie it off, and that. Now you're going to cut it out. All right. As you can see, mine's not going to be perfect or straight because we're going to tape it, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but you need to make sure that you have enough overlap to do what you need to make your kite. There's my piece of newspaper. Here is my kite. All right, and then, like I said, you're just going to kind of fold it in, and we're going to tape if I can find the end of my tape. Need to make sure it's kind of within where you had it. I'm just going to start with this side. You see how I'm just going to kind of fold it in, point to point. I'm just going to put a little piece of tape here for now until I get everything folded. I'm just going to kind of put that right there. We don't want this to move too much, so I'm going to do this side now. You'll notice your point's going to kind of have a little bit of an overlap. But that's okay. We can tape that into a point. And you can use other tape. I'm using masking tape. And then you can actually tape up to the corner, and I'm going to go around my dowel just so that it's a little bit more secure. But you don't want to cover up all of your wooden dowel because you're going to need to tie your flying string right here. Okay, so now we're going to do the other sides. See, it kind of overlapped a little too far, so I'm just going to tuck it around to the other side of my kite. It's all right. Very forgiving. Get our last fold in here. And just like we did with the other point, you can fold it till it's perfect. Okay. And tape it up. so now we have our kite shape. And you could do yours fatter, you could do it longer, you could do it bigger. That's just the width I happen to cut. All right. Now, you're gonna need another piece of string, and it doesn't need to be super long. You know, it just needs to be enough to tie on both ends right here to give you somewhere to tie your flying string to. So we're gonna just tie here. And you're just gonna tie both ends to either side of your middle bar. And then what will happen is you will tie the flying string to this string. And that way it'll give you a little bit more control. You kind of want to make sure they're spaced the same amount of distance from the center. So it's about half a thumb up there. Uh-oh. And after you tie them, you can tape them. But if you don't tape them, you can make adjustments as you start flying too, which is what I'm going to do. So, up there, and then you would tie your flying string onto here, which we will do in a little bit. First, we're going to finish our tail. So, as I was telling you, you know, it does call for a little bit of weight on the tail. And depending on whether you're using newspaper or plastic bag, you can use tape. You can also use the string to tie the bottom onto here, or tie. You can use string to tie all of the corners if you want instead of taping. I had tape, so I taped. I don't think it's gonna come off. You know, but as you start flying, if something changes, you can try other things. So, as I said before, I am going to use a little, just a nut, like you would get at the hardware store. You might have some laying around. I'm going to use 2, just to make sure it's good and heavy. And I have some pretty ribbon that I'm going to use as the tail of my kite, and that's where I will tie the nuts onto. So I'm just going to cut a pretty little piece and tie it onto the bottom here. And I will probably tie it and tape it just to make sure it stays on. Since this kind of ribbon is really, it's like a satin. So it may actually try to come off. That's why I'm gonna tie and tape. Tie it. And tape it so that it can't, hopefully won't come off. All right, and then for the weight, I'm just going to thread it on and make a little knot so that it can't come back off. Yep. Third one, hopefully make it right in between the two, make a big knot. Yeah, and see, it can't come off now. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to slide on the second one. And maybe a little further down, space them out. I want it to sit right about here. And like I said, if you don't have washers or little nuts like that, you can always use safety pins. And a safety pin you could actually just stick right through the ribbon, and maybe use 3 or 4 since they're not as heavy as these are. So that's my tail. And if I wanted, I could make little bows. You can decorate this if you want. You can add other colors, kind of add little streamers to it. And then for my flying string, you know, it depends on how far you want to go with it. I'm going to make mine really, 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 really long. And then I'm going to show you how I'm going to keep it from getting all tangled up too. All right, I think that should be long enough. All right, so I'm going to take the end of my string and we're going to find the middle, and we're just going to tie this onto the other string. And hopefully if you pull up, it should find the middle of your string pretty good. So I'm just going to knot it, and I'll trim this little piece off. And then, for a way to wrap my string up and to keep it from getting tangled, I have a toilet paper tube that I'm gonna cut into about halfway so that there's a slip, okay? And then I am going to find the other end of my string, and since I have them, I'm going to tie a nut onto the end, and then use that to stay inside my paper tube and wrap my string around, and then I can release it as my kite starts to fly, just like you would a regular kite. Now you could use, you know, another piece of wooden dowel if you have it. You could use a popsicle stick. You could use a skewer. I mean, you could use just about anything. I'm just using this because that's what I have. So, you know, a lot of these materials can be swapped out for other things. So don't be afraid to try it just because it's not what I used. All right, there's my washer. We're gonna slip it into my edge, and you see with the washer it can't come off, and then I can just wrap my string. I'm gonna wrap my string up, and then we're gonna go see if this will fly. I may just not have enough.
We're out here on this blustery day.
Trying to fly a kite. Let's go fly a kite. Obviously not up to the highest height, but we tried. Yeah. Alright, I hope you guys have more success and maybe more wind with your kites. Just when I stop, it starts to blow again. So, but I hope you guys try this out, and I hope you go fly a kite too. Bye.